You've been lied to about money, not in an obvious way, not in a way that's easy to point at, but in a quiet, persistent way that shapes how you see yourself, your future, and what you believe is possible. Because if you feel stuck financially, it's not just about your income, it's about how you think. And that's uncomfortable, because it means the problem isn't somewhere out there waiting to be fixed. It means it's been influencing your decisions, subtly, consistently, every single day. Most people never question this. They assume that if they just earn more, work harder, or wait long enough, something will eventually change. But years pass and the feeling stays the same. Still behind. Still catching up. Still wondering why nothing really moves forward. You might recognize that pattern in your own life. Waking up with pressure you can't fully explain. Choosing what feels safe, even when it leads nowhere. Watching other people move ahead while you stay in place, doing everything you were told would work. And over time, something shifts inside you. Not your effort, not your discipline, your expectations. You start believing this is just how life is supposed to feel, but it isn't. There's a reason this cycle is so hard to break. Research from Princeton University found that financial pressure can narrow your focus so much that it temporarily reduces cognitive performance by the equivalent of up to 13 IQ points. Think about that. When money feels tight, it's not just your options that shrink. Your thinking shrinks with it. You stop planning long term. You avoid risks, even the smart ones. You miss opportunities not because they aren't there, but because you can't see them clearly. So you react, you protect, you survive. And survival thinking feels responsible. It feels disciplined. It feels like you're doing the right thing. But over time, it becomes a trap. Because the longer you stay in that mode, the harder it becomes to think any other way. The habits feel normal. The limitations feel logical. The life you're living starts to feel like the only version available to you. And here's the part most people never realize. They don't stay stuck because they lack opportunity. They stay stuck because they've trained themselves to think like someone who is. Even when their income increases. Even when better options appear. Even when they should be doing better. Because they changed their circumstances. But not their thinking. And circumstances don't create freedom. Thinking does. This is where everything begins to shift. Because once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often fear disguises itself as logic. How often hesitation sounds like responsibility. How often comfort quietly replaces growth. And in that awareness, something powerful happens. You regain choice. In this video, we're going to break down the exact patterns that keep people stuck. Patterns that feel normal, reasonable, even safe, but quietly limit everything you could become. You'll see how certain thoughts lead to certain decisions, how those decisions turn into habits, and how those habits slowly build a life that feels smaller than it should. More importantly, you'll learn how to interrupt that cycle, not with motivation, not with hype, but with awareness, structure, and small shifts that compound over time. Because real change doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens when you start thinking differently, again and again, until it becomes who you are. So, as you listen, stay present. Don't just agree with what sounds good. Pay attention to what feels uncomfortable. The moments that make you pause. Those are the ones that matter. That's where something inside you begins to wake up. You're not here by accident, and if part of you has been waiting for clarity, for direction, for a real shift, this might be it. And the first trap, the one that controls everything, is something most people never even notice. Send this to someone who works hard but still feels stuck. Someone who's trying but can't figure out why nothing is changing. They don't need more effort. They need a new way to think. Chapter 1. Scarcity is making you think small. There's a moment most people don't notice. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel like failure. It feels responsible. You say no to something that could help you grow. You hesitate before taking a step forward. You tell yourself, not now, I can't afford to risk it. And in that moment, it feels like discipline. But it isn't. It's fear, disguised as logic. A few years ago, I had a friend named Daniel. He wasn't lazy, not even close. He worked 6 days a week, rarely complained, always showed up on time. The kind of person everyone describes as reliable, the one you can count on, the one who does everything right. But he was stuck. Same income, same routine, same quiet frustration he never really talked about. One night after work, we were sitting in his car outside a small takeout place. Nothing special. Just one of those late conversations where people stop pretending. He told me he'd been thinking about taking a certification course, It cost about $1,200, not cheap for him, but not impossible either. And it could help him move into a better role within a year. He had already done the research, already understood the path, already imagined the outcome. Then he said something that didn't match everything else. "I just don't think it's the right time." I asked him why. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared ahead for a few seconds, like he was trying to make his own reasoning sound convincing. "What if something goes wrong?" he said. "What if I need that money later?" That was it. No real obstacle, no unexpected problem, just a feeling that something might go wrong. And that feeling made the decision for him. A year later, nothing had changed. Same job, same income, same conversations. Except now the course had become more expensive, and the opportunity was gone. From the outside, it looks like he missed a chance. But that's not what really happened. He followed a pattern, a way of thinking that filters every decision through the same question. What if I lose? Not what could I gain, not who could I become. Just, what if this makes things worse? And when that question becomes your default, your world starts to shrink. Not because opportunities disappear, but because you stop reaching for them. Here's the part most people don't see. Scarcity doesn't just limit your money, it limits your imagination. When your mind is focused on protecting what you have, it stops exploring what's possible. You don't think creatively. You don't think long-term. You don't even think clearly. You think narrowly. You choose safety over growth. You choose certainty over potential. You choose short-term relief over long-term progress. And those choices don't stay small. They compound, not all at once, but quietly over time. There's a reason this happens. Research from Princeton University shows that when people are under financial pressure, their mental bandwidth shrinks. It's not about intelligence, it's not about capability, it's about cognitive load. Your mind becomes occupied with immediate concerns, bills, risks, what could go wrong. And when that happens, something important disappears. Clarity. So even if you know what to do, you don't do it, because it feels too risky, too uncertain, too far away. And this is where it becomes dangerous, because from the outside, your behavior looks reasonable. You're being careful, you're avoiding unnecessary risk. You're staying within your limits, but internally, something else is happening. You're training yourself to stay the same. Every time you choose safety over growth, your brain reinforces the idea that movement is dangerous. That change is something to avoid. So the next time an opportunity appears, you don't even fully consider it. You hesitate faster. You doubt sooner. You say no almost automatically. I've seen this pattern in my own life too. There was a time I passed on a small opportunity. Nothing life-changing. Just a side project that required a bit of time and a small upfront cost. I told myself I was being smart. Focus on stability first. Don't stretch yourself. Wait until things feel more secure. It all sounded reasonable, and it was completely wrong. Because what I was really protecting wasn't my money. It was my comfort. It was my identity. The version of me that stayed safe, predictable, and small. Months later, I watched someone else take a similar opportunity and build something real from it. Not perfectly, not instantly. But they moved, and I didn't. That's when it became clear. It wasn't about the opportunity, it was about the lens I used to judge it. Scarcity thinking doesn't shout, it whispers. It sounds like responsibility. It feels like caution, it looks like discipline. But if you follow it long enough, it always leads to the same place. No movement, no growth, no change. So here's a simple shift that can change everything. Before you make a decision, pause and ask yourself one question. Am I choosing this because it feels safe, or because it's actually strategic? There is a difference. Safety protects your current situation. Strategy builds your future. And if you're honest, you'll start to see how often you've been choosing the first one. You don't need to take reckless risks. You don't need to gamble everything. But you do need to recognize when your thinking is keeping you small, because the longer you stay in that pattern, the more natural it feels. And the more natural it feels, the harder it becomes to break. This is the first trap. The one that quietly shapes everything else. And most people never even realize they're in it. Chapter 2. You feel behind because you're looking sideways. The reason you feel behind isn't what you think. It's not your income. It's not your timing. It's not even your opportunities. It's where you're looking. Most people don't wake up feeling behind. They become that way, slowly, quietly, almost unconsciously. It starts with something harmless. You open your phone for a few minutes, scroll a little, check what others are doing. Someone got promoted, someone launched a business, someone moved to a new city. Someone your age is already where you thought you'd be by now. And just like that, something shifts. Nothing in your life changed. But the way you feel about your life did. That's the trap. A few years ago, I worked with someone named Alex. Smart guy, focused, disciplined in his own way. He wasn't chasing attention. He wasn't lazy. He had a plan. At least, he used to. Over time, I noticed something change. Every morning, before even starting work, he would open LinkedIn. Not for long, just a quick check. At first, it didn't seem like a problem, but then it became a habit. And then it became a reference point. He started measuring his progress against what he saw there. People announcing promotions, people celebrating milestones, people sharing wins that looked bigger, faster, better. And slowly, without realizing it, his focus shifted. He stopped asking, "What do I need to do today?" and started asking, "Am I behind?" That one question changed everything. His work didn't get worse overnight, but his attention did. He second-guessed decisions he used to make quickly. He compared his path to people in completely different situations. He felt pressure that didn't come from his reality, but from what he was consuming, and the worst part? He thought this pressure was helping him. He told himself it was motivation, but it wasn't. It was distraction, wearing the mask of ambition. There's a reason this happens. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that constant social comparison is directly linked to higher levels of anxiety, lower self-esteem, and reduced life satisfaction. Think about that. The more you compare, the worse you feel. And the worse you feel, the harder it becomes to focus on your own path. So you look again. And the cycle continues. Here's the twist most people miss. Comparison doesn't just affect how you feel, it changes how you think. When you constantly look sideways, your brain starts optimizing for perception instead of progress. You begin to care more about how things look than what they actually are. You chase visible wins. You avoid slow growth. You lose patience with anything that doesn't show immediate results. And that's where people start making decisions that don't belong to them. They switch paths too early. They quit things that were actually working. They chase goals they never truly wanted. Not because they're confused, but because they've been influenced. And influence is powerful when you don't question it. I saw this happen to Alex in a way he didn't even realize. He had been building a skill quietly for months. No big results yet, but steady progress. Then one day, after scrolling for maybe 10 minutes, he told me he was thinking about switching directions completely. I asked him why. He said, "I just feel like I'm wasting time." But he wasn't. He was just comparing his early stage to someone else's highlight moment. That's the illusion. You're not seeing their process. You're not seeing their failures. You're not seeing the years behind that one post. You're seeing the outcome, without the context. And your brain fills in the gap with a dangerous assumption. They're ahead. I'm behind. But that assumption is built on incomplete information. And decisions made from incomplete information almost always lead you in the wrong direction. Here's something simple, but uncomfortable. If you're honest, you've made decisions like this before. You've doubted your path not because it was wrong, but because it didn't look impressive fast enough. You've questioned your progress not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't visible. That's what comparison does. It disconnects you from your own timeline, and once you lose that connection, everything feels urgent. Everything feels late. Everything feels like you're falling behind, even when you're not. So here's the shift. Stop asking, "Am I ahead or behind?" Start asking, "Am I moving forward?" Because forward looks different for everyone. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it feels slow. But slow doesn't mean wrong, and invisible doesn't mean ineffective. In fact, the most meaningful growth in your life will happen in ways no one else can see. Skills you build in silence, habits you repeat when no one is watching. Decisions you make that don't look exciting, but change everything over time. That's real progress. And it only works if you stay focused on your own path long enough for it to compound. So try this. For the next 7 days, remove the triggers. Limit the platforms that make you compare. Stop checking what everyone else is doing. Give your mind space to think without noise. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel like you're missing something. But what you're actually doing is reclaiming your attention. And once your attention comes back, something powerful happens. Clarity. You start seeing your own path again. You start making decisions based on your reality. You stop reacting and start building. Because the truth is, you were never behind. You were distracted. And distraction is expensive. It costs you time, it costs you focus, it costs you momentum. But once you see it, you can't ignore it. And once you stop feeding it, it loses its power. This is the second trap. The one that makes you feel like you're losing, even when you're moving forward. And the next one is even more dangerous, because it feels like safety, while quietly destroying your potential. Chapter 3. Comfort is keeping you stuck, and you don't even see it. The next trap doesn't feel dangerous. It feels safe. It feels like stability, like control, like you're doing the right thing. And that's exactly why it's so hard to escape. Because comfort doesn't look like a problem. It looks like a reward. You tell yourself you've earned it. After everything you've been through, after all the pressure, all the effort, it makes sense to want something that feels easy, something predictable, something that doesn't demand too much from you. And for a while, it feels good. You settle into a routine. You stop taking unnecessary risks. You focus on keeping things steady. Nothing is falling apart, but nothing is moving forward either. That's the part most people miss. Comfort doesn't destroy your life all at once. It slows it down just enough that you don't notice you've stopped growing. I saw this happen to someone very close to me, my cousin, Mark. He got a stable job right after college, nothing flashy, but solid. Around $45,000 a year. Good enough to live, good enough to feel secure. At first it made sense. He wanted consistency, he wanted to build a foundation, and compared to the uncertainty of starting something new, his path felt smart, so he stayed. Year 1 turned into year 2. Year 2 turned into year 5. Same job, same salary range, same daily routine. He wasn't struggling, but he wasn't progressing either. Every time the idea of change came up, he had a reason. I don't want to lose what I have. I just need a bit more time. It's not that bad. And he was right. It wasn't that bad. That's what made it dangerous. Because when something is clearly painful, you change it. You have to. But when something is just comfortable enough, you stay. There was one conversation I'll never forget. We were sitting in his apartment one evening. Nothing unusual. Just talking about work, life, the usual things. I asked him, "Do you still want more than this?" He didn't answer right away. He looked around his place, then back at me and said something that stuck with me. "I don't know anymore." That wasn't the problem. The problem was that he used to know. Somewhere along the way, comfort didn't just change his situation, it changed his standards. That's the psychological trap. Comfort doesn't just keep you where you are. It slowly convinces you that where you are is enough, even when it isn't. There's a reason this happens. Your brain is designed to avoid discomfort. It associates uncertainty with risk and risk with potential loss. So when you find a situation that feels stable, it wants to hold on to it, not because it's the best option, but because it's the safest. And the longer you stay in that environment, the more normal it feels. You adapt. What once felt temporary becomes permanent. What once felt like a step becomes a destination. And without realizing it, you stop pushing yourself. Not all at once, but gradually. You stop learning new skills. You stop challenging your limits. You stop imagining bigger outcomes, because nothing is forcing you to. And that's the danger. Growth requires friction. It requires moments where you feel uncertain, stretched, even uncomfortable. Without that, your life doesn't expand. It stabilizes. And stability without growth turns into stagnation. Here's the part that most people won't admit. If you're honest, you've chosen comfort when you knew you needed challenge. You've stayed in situations that felt fine instead of stepping into ones that could make you better. You've delayed decisions that mattered, not because you didn't know what to do, but because doing it would have been uncomfortable. And every time you make that choice, you reinforce the same pattern. Stay where it's easy, avoid what's hard. But the things that are hard are the things that change you. I remember a point in my own life where I had to face this directly. I had built a routine that felt manageable, predictable, low stress. On the surface, everything was okay, but deep down I knew I wasn't growing. I wasn't pushing myself. I wasn't improving in any meaningful way. I was just maintaining. And the scariest part wasn't that I was stuck. It was that I was getting comfortable being stuck. That realization hit harder than anything else, Because once comfort becomes your standard, growth starts to feel optional. And when growth feels optional, it eventually disappears. That's when things start to decline, not dramatically, quietly. You lose your edge, you lose your urgency. You lose the version of yourself that wanted more. So here's the shift. Stop asking, is this comfortable? Start asking, is this helping me grow? Because those are not the same thing. Comfort feels good in the moment. Growth builds something better over time. And you can't prioritize both equally. At some point you have to choose. That doesn't mean you need to make reckless decisions. It doesn't mean you need to throw away stability, but it does mean you need to introduce challenge back into your life. On purpose. Small, controlled discomfort. Do something that stretches you. Learn something that feels difficult. Put yourself in situations where you're not fully in control. At first it will feel unnatural. You'll question yourself. You'll want to go back to what's easy. But if you stay with it, something shifts. You start to feel alive again, engaged, focused, present. Because growth has a feeling. And once you reconnect with it, comfort doesn't feel as satisfying anymore. It feels limiting. That's when you know you're changing. That's when you know you're moving again. Because the goal isn't to eliminate comfort. It's to stop letting it control your decisions. This is the third trap. The one that feels like safety, but quietly keeps you exactly where you are. And the next one is even more subtle. Because it's shaping your decisions. Without you even realizing it. Chapter 4. Your environment is deciding for you. You think you're making your own decisions. You're not. At least, not as much as you believe. Most of what you do every day feels intentional. You wake up, go to work, respond to things, make choices, move through your routine. It all feels like you're in control. But if you slow down and really look at it, you'll start to notice something uncomfortable. A lot of your decisions aren't coming from clarity. They're coming from your environment, what you see, what you hear, what you're surrounded by every single day. And the dangerous part is it doesn't feel like influence. It feels like reality. A few years ago, I met someone named Chris. He wasn't struggling. He had a decent job, steady income, a normal life. Nothing extreme in either direction. But he felt stuck. Not in an obvious way. Not like something was wrong. Just stagnant. Same routine every day, same conversations, same thoughts looping over and over again. One day, we were talking about goals, and I asked him a simple question. What are you actually working toward right now? He paused. Not because he didn't want to answer, because he didn't have one. That wasn't the surprising part. The surprising part was what came next. I don't really think about that anymore, he said. I just do what I need to do. That sentence sounds normal. Responsible even. But if you listen closely, there's something missing. Direction. Over time, Chris had stopped choosing where he was going. He was just responding to where he already was. And his environment made that feel completely reasonable. Same coworkers every day talking about the same complaints. Same habits after work, same places, same conversations. Same expectations about what was realistic and what wasn't. No one around him was building anything new. No one was taking risks. No one was pushing beyond what they already knew. So, without realizing it, he adjusted. Not consciously, gradually. His goals got smaller. His thinking got narrower. His standards lowered just enough to match what he saw every day. And the most dangerous part? It didn't feel like he was losing anything. It felt like he was being realistic. That's how environment works. It doesn't force you to change. It makes certain choices feel normal, and others feel unnecessary. Over time, you stop questioning it. You stop asking, is this what I actually want? And start assuming this is just how things are. There's a concept in behavioral science that explains this clearly. People don't rise to the level of their goals. They fall to the level of their environment. Because your environment doesn't just influence what you do. It shapes what you believe is possible. I saw this in my own life in a way I couldn't ignore. There was a period where everything around me was predictable. Same type of conversations, same level of thinking, same expectations. And without realizing it, I started shrinking. Not dramatically, subtly. I stopped challenging certain ideas. I stopped questioning what I was capable of. I stopped aiming beyond what everyone else around me thought was reasonable. It didn't feel like I was holding myself back. It felt like I was being grounded, practical. Until one moment changed everything. I had a conversation with someone outside of that environment. Someone who thought differently, moved differently, expected more. And within 10 minutes, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Discomfort. Not the bad kind. The kind that makes you realize you've been playing smaller than you could. They talked about goals that felt unrealistic to me. Moves that felt risky. Standards that felt high. And instead of dismissing it, something clicked. Nothing they said was impossible. It was just unfamiliar. That's when I understood something clearly. My environment hadn't been protecting me. It had been limiting me. Not aggressively, not obviously. Just enough to keep me where I was. That's the twist most people don't see. Your environment doesn't need to be negative to hold you back. It just needs to be average, because average environments produce average thinking, and average thinking produces predictable results. So if you feel stuck, it's not always because you lack discipline. It's because your environment is reinforcing the same patterns every day. Same input, same thoughts, same decisions, same life. Here's a question that might feel uncomfortable. Who are you around the most? And more importantly, how do they think? Do they challenge you? Do they push you? Do they expect more from themselves and from you? Or do they normalize staying where you are? Because over time, you will adjust. You will match the energy, the standards, the expectations of the people and environments you're surrounded by. Not because you want to, but because it's natural. And that's why change feels so hard. It's not just about changing your habits. It's about changing what's influencing those habits. So here's the shift. Stop focusing only on what you need to do. Start paying attention to what's shaping what you do. Your inputs matter. The conversations you listen to, the content you consume, the people you spend time with. They are all programming your decisions. Quietly, consistently, whether you notice it or not. You don't need to cut everyone off. You don't need to completely rebuild your life overnight, but you do need to become aware. Start small. Change what you listen to. Expose yourself to better thinking. Spend time, even briefly, around people who are moving in a direction you respect. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, out of place, like you don't belong. That's a good sign. It means you're stepping outside the environment that's been keeping you the same. And when you do that consistently, something begins to shift. Your standards rise. Your thinking expands. Your decisions change, not because you forced them to, but because your environment changed what felt normal. That's how real change happens. Not through one big decision, but through consistent exposure to something better. This is the fourth trap, the one that makes you believe you're in control, when your surroundings are quietly deciding everything for you. And the next one is even more dangerous, because it feels like protection, but it's actually the reason you stay small. Chapter 5. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of losing. Most people think they're afraid to fail. They're not. Failure is loud, obvious, easy to point at. What they're really afraid of is losing what they already have. And that fear is quieter, harder to notice, much easier to justify. It sounds like responsibility. It feels like maturity. It looks like you're being careful, but underneath it, it's control. You're trying to protect your current life so tightly that there's no space left to build a better one. A few years ago, I knew someone named Ryan. He had what most people would call a good situation, stable job, decent income, predictable routine. Nothing exciting, but nothing falling apart either. On paper, everything made sense. But every time we talked, there was something in his tone that didn't match that picture. He was restless, not in a dramatic way. He wasn't complaining or looking for sympathy. It was quieter than that. It showed up in small comments. I feel like I could be doing more. I don't want to be here forever. I just don't know if it's worth the risk. That last part was always there. The risk. At one point, he had an opportunity to move into a different role. Not guaranteed success, not a perfect situation, but a clear step forward. More responsibility, more upside, more growth, and also more uncertainty. He thought about it for weeks. He made lists. He ran scenarios. He tried to be logical about it, and every time he came back to the same conclusion. What if it doesn't work? Not what if it does, what if it doesn't? That one question outweighed everything else. In the end, he stayed where he was. It felt like the smart decision. No disruption, no risk, no chance of losing what he already had. But something changed after that. Not his job. Him. He became more cautious, more hesitant, less willing to even consider new options. Because once you choose safety once, it becomes easier to choose it again, and again, and again. That's how the trap builds. You don't just avoid one risk. You train yourself to avoid all of them. There's a reason this pattern is so strong. Behavioral research led by people like Daniel Kahneman shows that humans feel the pain of loss more intensely than the pleasure of gain. In simple terms, losing $100 hurts more than gaining $100 feels good. Now apply that to your life. Losing stability, losing comfort, losing certainty. Your brain treats those possibilities like threats, so it pushes you toward the safest option, even if that option keeps you exactly where you are. And the worst part? It convinces you that you're making the right decision, that you're being rational, that you're protecting yourself. But here's the twist. You're not protecting your future, you're protecting your present, and those are not the same thing. Your present is built on what you already have. Your future is built on what you're willing to risk. If you prioritize one too much, you lose the other. Ryan didn't fail. He didn't make a bad move. He didn't lose anything immediately. But over time, something else happened. The gap between what he wanted and what he was doing started to grow, slowly, almost invisibly, until one day it wasn't small anymore. It was obvious, and by then, changing felt harder. Because the longer you stay in the same place, the more you have to lose by leaving it. That's how people get stuck for years. Not because they made one wrong decision, but because they kept making the same safe one. If you're honest, you've felt this before. You've hesitated when something mattered. You've stayed where it was familiar, even when you knew it wasn't enough. You've told yourself, I'll do it later, not because you needed more time, but because you didn't want to risk what you already had. And every time you do that, you reinforce the same belief. That safety is more important than growth. But here's the reality. Playing safe is not neutral. It has a cost. It costs you momentum. It costs you opportunities. It costs you the version of yourself you could have become. And unlike obvious failures, you don't feel that cost immediately. You feel it later. In the form of regret, in the form of what if, in the form of looking back and realizing you stayed the same when you had the chance to change. That's the real loss. Not failing, not trying. So here's a different way to look at risk. Instead of asking, what if I lose? Ask, what am I losing by staying the same? Because staying where you are is not free. It just feels that way. Every year you don't grow, you lose time you can't get back. Every opportunity you don't take, you lose experience you can't replace. Every decision you delay, you lose momentum you'll have to rebuild later. That's a cost. You just don't see it immediately. The people who move forward aren't fearless. They feel the same uncertainty, the same doubt, the same hesitation. The difference is they don't let the fear of losing control their decisions. They accept that some level of loss is part of growth. Time, comfort, certainty. You don't get to keep everything and still move forward. At some point, you have to let go of something familiar to make room for something better. That's the trade. And once you understand that, the decision becomes clearer. Not easier, but clearer. You stop trying to eliminate risk and start choosing which risk is worth taking. The risk of trying, or the risk of staying the same. Because both exist, only one moves you forward. This is the fifth trap. The one that convinces you you're protecting yourself, when you're actually holding yourself back. And the next one goes even deeper. Because it's not just about your decisions anymore. It's about who you believe you are. Chapter 6. Your identity is quietly limiting your life. At some point, it stops being about your habits. It stops being about your environment. It stops being about fear or comfort or comparison. It becomes something deeper, who you believe you are, not what you say out loud, not what you post, not what you tell other people, but the quiet, internal definition you carry every day. The one that shapes your decisions before you even realize you're making them. Most people never question this. They assume their identity is fixed, something they discovered, not something they built. I'm just not that kind of person. I've always been like this. I'm not the type to take risks. And those sentences sound harmless, but they're not. They're limits, invisible ones. Because once you define yourself in a certain way, your brain starts protecting that definition, even if it's holding you back. I saw this clearly with someone I used to work with. Her name was Lena. She was talented, sharp, the kind of person who could understand things quickly and execute without much guidance. But she never stepped forward, never took the lead, never spoke up in meetings, never positioned herself for growth. At first, people assumed she lacked confidence, but that wasn't it. One day, after a long meeting where she had stayed quiet again, I asked her something simple. "Why didn't you say anything? You clearly had the answer." She smiled a little, almost apologetically, and said, "I'm just not a leadership type." That was it. That one sentence explained everything. Not because it was true, but because she believed it was. And once you believe something about yourself, you don't need external limitations anymore. You become your own. From that moment on, everything she did made sense. She avoided situations that required visibility. She downplayed her ideas before anyone else could. She stayed in roles that matched her identity, even if they didn't match her potential. And the most dangerous part, it felt consistent. It felt like she was being authentic, but she wasn't being authentic. She was being predictable. That's the trap. Identity doesn't just describe your behavior, it drives it. There's a concept in behavioral psychology that explains this clearly. People don't act in alignment with what they want. They act in alignment with who they believe they are. If you see yourself as someone who plays small, you will make small decisions. If you see yourself as someone who avoids risk, you will avoid opportunities. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will find ways to stay in struggle, not consciously, but consistently. And over time, those small decisions build a life that matches that identity perfectly. That's why change feels so hard. It's not because you don't know what to do. It's because doing something different would contradict who you believe you are, and your brain resists that. It protects your identity the same way it protects your comfort, even if that identity is limiting you. I had to face this in my own life in a way I couldn't ignore. There was a time when I saw myself as someone who needed more time, more preparation, more knowledge, more certainty. I told myself I wasn't ready yet, that I needed to get better before I could step into something bigger, and on the surface, that sounded responsible. But underneath it, it was just another identity. Someone who waits, someone who delays, someone who stays in preparation instead of action. And once I saw that, it became impossible to ignore. Because every decision I made started to look different. Every hesitation wasn't just a moment. It was a pattern, a reinforcement of the same identity. So I tried something small. Not a massive change, just one decision that didn't match who I thought I was. I spoke up when I would normally stay quiet. I took action before I felt fully ready. I moved forward without overthinking every detail. And something unexpected happened. Nothing broke. Nothing collapsed. In fact, things started moving. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. That's when the real shift happened. Identity isn't fixed, it's built. And more importantly, it's updated through action, not through thinking, not through affirmations, through decisions. Every time you act in a way that doesn't match your old identity, you weaken it. Every time you repeat that action, you replace it. That's how real change happens. Not by trying to become someone new overnight, but by slowly proving to yourself that you already can. Lena eventually figured this out too. Not all at once, but gradually. She started contributing more in meetings. She shared ideas even when she wasn't completely sure. She stepped into small leadership moments, one at a time. At first it felt uncomfortable, like she was pretending, like it wasn't really her. But over time that feeling faded, because the more she acted differently, the more her identity had to adjust, and eventually the sentence changed. Not dramatically, just slightly. I guess I can lead when I need to. That shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Because once your identity expands, your decisions follow. And once your decisions change, your life has no choice but to change with them. So here's the question. Who have you been telling yourself you are? And more importantly, is that identity helping you grow or keeping you small? Because if it's keeping you small, you don't need to fight it. You don't need to destroy it. You just need to challenge it. One decision at a time. Do something that doesn't match the old version of you. Then do it again and again until the old identity no longer fits. This is the sixth trap. The one that lives inside your own mind. The one that makes you believe you're limited. When in reality, you've just been repeating the same version of yourself. And the next one is where everything starts to come together. Because it's not just about who you are anymore. It's about what you do. Every single day. Chapter 7. Your daily decisions are building your future. Most people are waiting for a big change, a better opportunity, a clearer moment, a turning point that finally shifts everything. But that moment rarely comes the way they expect, because your life doesn't change in one decision. It changes in the ones you repeat. Every day, quietly, without attention. That's what makes this trap so dangerous. You don't feel it happening. You just wake up one day and realize you're in the same place you were a year ago. Not because nothing happened, but because everything you did led you right back here. I saw this in a way that was impossible to ignore with someone I used to live with. His name was Eric. We weren't that different at the start. Same age, similar goals, both trying to figure things out, but over time our paths started to separate. Not dramatically, just gradually. And it had nothing to do with talent or opportunity. It came down to something much simpler, how we used our days. Eric had a routine. Work during the day, then relax at night. Watch something, scroll a bit. Maybe think about doing something productive, but usually decide to rest instead. Just today, he'd say, I'll start tomorrow. And to be fair, it made sense. He worked hard. He deserved to relax. There was nothing obviously wrong with what he was doing. That's what made it so easy to repeat. One day didn't matter. One night didn't change anything. But those days didn't stay separate. They stacked. And after a few months, something became clear. He wasn't moving. Same skills, same habits, same conversations about what he wanted to do. Meanwhile, I had started doing something small, nothing extreme, just one decision I made every day, no matter what, even if I was tired, even if I didn't feel like it. One action that moved me forward. Some days it was learning, some days it was building, some days it was just thinking more clearly about what I was doing. It didn't feel powerful. It didn't feel like progress most of the time. But it was consistent, and consistency does something that intensity never can. It compounds. At first you don't see it. Then slowly, you start to feel it. Clarity improves, confidence builds, momentum starts to form. And once momentum starts, everything changes. Because now you're not forcing yourself to move. You're already moving. That's the shift most people miss. They're looking for motivation. But motivation is unreliable. It shows up when it wants to, leaves when it wants to. You can't build your life on something that inconsistent. What actually matters is structure. The decisions you make automatically, the actions you don't negotiate, because those are the ones that shape your life. Eric didn't fail. He didn't make a big mistake. He just repeated the same small decisions. And those decisions built a life that looked exactly like them. That's how it works. Your life is not a result of what you intend. It's a result of what you do, consistently. There's a concept often talked about in behavioral science. Small actions, repeated over time, create disproportionate results. Not immediately, but inevitably. And once you understand that, something shifts. You stop waiting for big moments and start respecting small ones. Because every small decision is a vote. For the person you're becoming. Stay where it's easy, that's a vote. Do something that moves you forward, that's a vote. Avoid discomfort, that's a vote. Lean into growth, that's a vote. And over time, those votes build your identity. They build your habits. They build your results. That's why change feels so slow at first. Because you're not seeing the accumulation yet. But it's happening. Always in the background. The real danger isn't making bad decisions. It's making neutral ones. The ones that don't push you forward or backward. They just keep you where you are. Because staying the same requires less effort than growing, and your brain will always choose the easier path, unless you interrupt it. I had a moment where this became painfully clear. I looked at a week of my life and realized something uncomfortable. Nothing I did that week made me better, not worse, just the same. And that was the problem. Because if a week can pass like that, so can a month, so can a year. That's how people lose time, not by making one bad decision, but by making none that matter. So I changed one thing. I created a rule. Every day, no matter what, I had to do something that made my future slightly better. Not perfect. Not impressive. Just better. And I removed the option to negotiate it. No excuses, no I'll do it later. Just action. Some days it was easy. Some days it felt pointless. But over time it became part of how I operated. And that's when everything shifted. Because once something becomes part of your identity, it no longer feels like effort. It feels normal. That's where real change happens, not when you're motivated, but when your behavior becomes automatic. So here's the question. What are your daily decisions building? Not what you say you want, not what you plan to do. What are you actually doing every single day? Because that's the direction you're going, whether you realize it or not. If nothing changes, nothing changes. But if one decision changes, and you repeat it, everything starts to move. This is the seventh trap, the one that makes you believe your life will change someday, while your daily actions are keeping it exactly the same. And the final shift is the one that brings everything together. Because once you understand it, you stop reacting to life and start shaping it. Chapter 8. Think like someone who wins. At some point, everything comes down to this. Not your habits, not your environment, not even your past. Your thinking, the way you interpret situations, the way you make decisions under pressure, the way you see time, risk, and possibility. That's the difference, not in what people do, but in how they think before they do it. Most people are reacting to life. They wait for something to happen, then respond. They adjust based on circumstances. They move when they feel ready. But people who win don't operate like that. They think ahead. They act based on where they're going, not where they are. And that shift changes everything. I saw this clearly through someone I met a few years ago named Jason. At the time, nothing about his situation stood out. No big title, no obvious advantage, no massive head start. If anything, he was behind in a lot of ways. Less experience, fewer connections, still figuring things out. But there was something different about him. It wasn't what he was doing. It was how he approached everything. I remember one conversation we had that stuck with me. We were talking about a decision he needed to make. It involved time, effort, and no guaranteed result. From the outside, it looked risky. I asked him, "What if it doesn't work?" He didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be further ahead than I am now." That answer didn't make sense at first, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. He wasn't evaluating the decision based on outcome. He was evaluating it based on growth. That's a completely different way of thinking. Most people ask, "Will this work?" People who win ask, "Will this move me forward?" Those are not the same question. One is focused on certainty, the other is focused on progress. And progress always wins in the long run. Jason didn't get everything right. He made mistakes, took wrong turns, wasted time in some areas. But he kept moving. And because he kept moving, he kept learning. And because he kept learning, his decisions kept improving. That's the advantage, not perfection. Momentum. There's a well-known study from Stanford University often referred to as the marshmallow experiment. It showed that people who could delay immediate rewards for a larger future outcome tended to have better long-term results. But here's the part most people misunderstand. It's not just about patience. It's about perspective, the ability to see beyond the moment you're in, to make decisions today based on who you want to become, not just how you feel right now. That's what separates short-term thinking from long-term thinking. Short-term thinking asks, what feels good right now? What's easy? What avoids discomfort? Long-term thinking asks, what builds something better? What creates momentum? What aligns with the future I want? And the two often point in opposite directions. That's why it's hard. That's why most people don't do it. Because in the moment, the long-term choice rarely feels better. It feels harder, slower, less rewarding. But over time, it compounds in ways the short-term choice never can. I remember a point where I had to face this directly. There were two paths in front of me. One was easier, immediate reward, less effort, more comfort. The other was slower. Required more discipline, no instant payoff. For a moment, I almost chose the easy one. It made sense, it felt justified. But then I asked myself a different question. Not which one do I want right now, but which one would the person I'm trying to become choose? That question changed everything, because it removed emotion from the decision. It replaced it with direction, and once I saw it that way, the answer was obvious. Not easy, but obvious. That's the shift. When you start thinking like someone who wins, your decisions stop being random. They become aligned with your future, aligned with your growth, aligned with who you're becoming. And once that alignment is there, consistency becomes easier, because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're moving in one direction. Most people are pulled in multiple directions at once. Comfort versus growth. Fear versus opportunity. Short-term versus long-term. And that internal conflict slows everything down. But when your thinking becomes clear, that conflict disappears. Not because the choices get easier, but because you know which one matters. So here's the final shift. Stop asking, what should I do? Start asking, what would the person I want to become do? Then do that. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it doesn't pay off immediately. Because that's how identity, habits, and results all come together. Through aligned decisions, repeated over time. That's how people build something real, not through one breakthrough moment, but through consistent thinking that leads to consistent action. Jason didn't become successful overnight, but he became someone who moves forward no matter what. And once you become that person, the results eventually follow. That's the part most people miss. Success isn't something you chase. It's something that catches up to you when your thinking is aligned with growth long enough. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's this. You don't need more time. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. You need to think differently. Because once your thinking changes, everything else has no choice but to follow. That's not motivation. That's direction. And direction is what builds a life. This is the final shift. The one that brings everything together. The one that separates people who stay where they are from those who move forward, no matter what. And once you see it, you can't go back to thinking the same way again. You've just gone through something most people never take the time to understand. Not money, not success, but the way thinking shapes everything. And if you really paid attention, you probably noticed something. None of this was about luck. None of this was about where you started. It was about patterns. The way you think when things feel uncertain. The way you react when you feel behind. The way you choose comfort over growth or safety over progress. Because step by step, chapter by chapter, you saw something clearly. Scarcity thinking keeps you small. Comparison makes you feel behind. Comfort slows your growth without you noticing. Your environment shapes your standards. Fear of losing keeps you from moving. Your identity defines your limits. Your daily decisions build your life. And your thinking determines your direction. That's everything, not in theory, in reality. And the truth is, none of these traps are obvious when you're inside them. They feel normal. That's why people stay stuck for years, not because they don't want more, not because they don't try, but because they don't see what's actually holding them back. Now you do. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's where the real work begins. Because awareness alone doesn't change your life. Action does, not big dramatic action. Small, consistent shifts. The kind that don't look impressive at first, but change everything over time. So don't try to fix everything at once. Don't walk away from this thinking you need to rebuild your entire life overnight. You don't. Start with one thing. Notice your thinking today. Catch yourself when you default to fear. When you compare. When you choose comfort without questioning it. Then make one different decision. Just one. Choose growth instead of safety. Focus instead of distraction. Action instead of delay. It won't feel natural at first. That's the point, because you're stepping outside the patterns that kept you the same, and the more you do that, the more something begins to shift. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your decisions become stronger. Your confidence becomes real, not forced, not fake. Built. That's how change happens, not all at once, but through repetition, through consistency, through choosing again and again to think differently. And if you stay with that long enough, your life will reflect it, not instantly, but inevitably. So take the next 72 hours seriously, not perfectly, but intentionally. Day 1, just observe your thoughts. Day 2, change one decision. Day 3, take one action that feels uncomfortable, but moves you forward. That's it. Simple, but powerful if you actually do it. And if you're still here listening to this, it means something. You didn't click away. You didn't ignore it. Something in you knows you're capable of more. So don't let this just be another video you watched. Let it be something you used. Because information doesn't change anything. Application does. And before you go, take a moment to think about someone in your life. Someone who's working hard but still feels stuck. Someone who's trying, but can't figure out why things aren't changing. Send this video to them. Not because it's perfect, but because it might be exactly what they need to hear right now. You never know how much one shift in thinking can change someone's direction. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to listen, to reflect, and to be honest with yourself. That alone puts you ahead of most people. And if you're ready to keep going, to keep building, to keep thinking differently, I'll see you in the next video.